Welcome back, dear viewers. Today, we're delving into the intricate tapestry of human connections, friendship, love, and the myriad ways in which relationships mold our lives. With a wave to the homeowners, Charlotte bid her goodbyes and gently shut the front door behind her. A heavy sigh escaped her lips, drifting into the stillness of the early morning. The compensation for her work was decent, yet enduring the homeowner's treatment was an ordeal she wouldn't wish on anyone, not even her worst enemy. Layla Allen, the lady of the house, exuded an air of assumed superiority, based on her alleged royal lineage, an assertion still awaiting validation. Layla's excessive pride and frequent boasts about her supposed ancestry grated on those around her. Every conversation, it seemed, veered into debates about bloodlines and heritage. Henry, Layla's husband, lived in the shadows of his wife's actions. Expected to remain silent, he watched as she dominated every discourse. His attempts to interject were swiftly silenced, often leading to public embarrassment. Yet, despite the disharmony, they remained together. Henry had learned to navigate his wife's eccentricities, choosing tranquility over perpetual discord. A retired real estate agent, he sought solace outdoors, fishing, hunting, finding solace in nature away from his domineering spouse. Layla, the prosperous proprietor of a chain of handbag boutiques, maintained an elegant facade despite the passage of time. Her conduct, however, was far from commendable, leaving those around her yearning for a transformation in her attitude. Though childless at present, they had once been parents. Their long-awaited son had illuminated their lives, a radiant star around which their world orbited. Yet, fate dealt them a cruel hand, snatching him away in a tragic car accident 7 years ago. Charlotte had become a part of their household shortly after their loss, initially as a roommate. The previous tenant, whom Layla preferred to label as her attendant, had hinted at a more joyful era within the house before the tragedy. However, the passing of their son, Evan, had catalyzed a profound transformation in the household. Layla Allen had seemingly spiraled into a state of inconsolable grief. What confounded Charlotte was Layla's newfound penchant for self-aggrandizement and its potential connection to the loss of her child. Perhaps it had existed in the background, overshadowed by the family's happiness. At times, Charlotte contemplated resigning from her position within the Rind household. She held the belief that she could secure alternative employment without undue hassle. Charlotte embodied a warm and pleasant disposition. Despite potential disparagement about her vocation, she stood resolute. She carried no shame in her profession, staunchly believing that there was honor in what she did. In truth, Charlotte possessed the potential to excel in a variety of fields, as long as they fell within legal and ethical boundaries, offering a reasonable livelihood. However, Mrs. Adams' eccentric conduct reached an intolerable crescendo. Charlotte began to speculate whether these actions served as an indirect message, signaling her unwelcome status in the owner's residence. In these trying moments, Charlotte frequently sought counsel from her sage and elderly grandmother, Betty. Betty, with her years of experience and wisdom, offered Charlotte valuable advice. There were instances when Betty's guidance averted rash choices that Charlotte might have lamented. Upon hearing Charlotte's account of her employer-related predicament, Grandma Betty took a beat to collect her thoughts before casting a warm smile toward Charlotte. "The mere fact that you came to me before taking any hasty measures speaks volumes about your character," she remarked. She then fixed Charlotte with a gentle but resolute gaze. "Charlotte, my dear, your heart is full of compassion. Do not let the negativity of others affect you. Those who harbor discontent often attempt to disseminate it to others. Your best armor is to disregard such pessimism. Furthermore, remember that growing old is a challenging journey. With age comes irritability. You cannot fathom the trials they may be grappling with. Aging ushers in an array of difficulties, and some struggle to cope. Extend grace, cultivate understanding, and, most importantly, never internalize their actions." Charlotte sat, absorbing her grandmother's sagacity, grateful for her counsel. It was reassuring to have someone who could illuminate the path when things turned unclear. "Your insights mean the world, grandmother. I hadn't contemplated it from that angle." "Your perspective is remarkably enlightening," Charlotte responded. As she moved to depart, Grandma Betty gently clasped her wrist at the threshold. She bestowed one final piece of wisdom upon Charlotte. "May God bless you with the opportunity to reach the same age as the lady for whom you worked. When you reach that stage of life, you'll understand her behavior better." On any regular day, Layla would doggedly shadow Charlotte, observing her tasks with unwavering attention. However, today was different. Charlotte relished the absence of Layla's watchful eyes, allowing her to engage in her demanding chores with a sigh of relief. A soothing melody hummed from Charlotte's lips as she embraced the tranquil morning ambience, carrying out her cleaning duties undisturbed. After vacuuming the rooms, she moved on to caring for a sizable houseplant perched by the window, its lush foliage gathering dust. Her fingers reached for a damp cloth, set on tidying the plant, when her gaze unintentionally gravitated toward the outdoor scenery. The sight before her brought her bustling motions to an abrupt stop. Once again, there she stood, the young girl of perhaps 8 or 9 years. Her attire clashed with the upscale surroundings, betraying the harshness of her circumstances. Frail and clad in shabby garments, her appearance suggested either homelessness or grave parental neglect. Charlotte had spotted her the prior evening too, her heartstrings pulled by the girl who seemed to have been driven to begging for survival. Yet when Charlotte had extended some food, the girl had darted away in haste. Today, she had returned, positioned by the gate, her gaze fixed on the house. Charlotte found herself puzzled by the girl's recurring visits. Filled with a resolute spirit, Charlotte set aside her cloth and approached the door. Catching the girl's intention to retreat, Charlotte quickly interjected, "Please, stay. Don't be frightened. I won't harm you. I promise." Momentarily hesitant, the girl cast cautious glances in Charlotte's direction. Stepping closer to the gate, Charlotte offered a reassuring smile and opened the gate gently, aiming not to overwhelm her. A swift sweep of the surroundings confirmed that the girl was unaccompanied. "Would you like to come inside and have something to eat?" Charlotte inquired, her tone soft. The girl maintained silence, her posture still. Recognizing her trepidation, Charlotte exhibited patience, steering clear of sudden motions that could startle her. Despite her hardship, the girl radiated an undeniable charm. Her azure eyes locked onto Charlotte's, revealing depths of sorrow and gravity. "Don't worry, we're alone in the house," Charlotte reassured the girl, aiming to soothe her concerns. The girl took a tentative step forward, gradually approaching Charlotte. "I'm Charlotte," she introduced herself with a friendly smile, trying to maintain an atmosphere of reassurance. The girl remained too shy to respond verbally. Anticipating her hesitance, Charlotte added, "It's okay if you don't want to tell me your name. That's perfectly fine. Shall we go inside now?" Extending her hand, Charlotte watched as the child timidly placed her tiny hand in Charlotte's outstretched palm. A quick glance at her watch revealed that she was hopeful for a delay in the homeowner's return. Layla's reaction to finding her straying from her duties was bound to be unfavorable. Guiding the girl gently, Charlotte led her into the spacious kitchen. The child entered with a mixture of caution and curiosity, her eyes wide. "Sweetheart, please make yourself comfortable," Charlotte encouraged, gesturing to a chair. She promptly prepared biscuits and gravy, placing the plate in front of the girl. Initially hesitant, the child observed the food before her. But hunger eventually overcame her shyness, and she began to nibble on the cookies before devouring them with growing speed. Watching her eat so eagerly, Charlotte couldn't help but feel concern that she might consume too much after likely not having eaten for a while. "Would you like to tell me your name, sweetheart?" Charlotte inquired, adopting a soft and comforting tone. The girl regarded her warily for a moment, but eventually seemed to conclude that Charlotte posed no threat. "I'm Zoe," she murmured quietly. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Zoe," Charlotte responded warmly, detecting a faint smile on Zoe's lips. Seeing Zoe's lingering gaze toward the refrigerator, Charlotte picked up on the unspoken request for more food. "Oh, dear, I understand you're still hungry, but too much food might upset your stomach right now. How about something sweet instead?" At Zoe's nod and a small smile, Charlotte retrieved some candy from the top cabinet. Zoe took one and popped it into her mouth, her legs swinging under the table, a sign that she was beginning to feel more at ease. "Zoe, that is such a beautiful name. Do you live around here, sweetie?" Charlotte inquired, hoping to engage the girl in a conversation. Charlotte mustered the courage to ask, "Is your dad around here?" Zoe's response was a mix of uncertainty and hesitation. "Yes. No. I mean, I came here to find my dad." Charlotte's initial assumption was that Zoe's father might be employed as a construction worker at a nearby site, and the girl had inadvertently followed him and lost her way. "Is your dad a construction worker?" Charlotte ventured to ask. The girl's head shook, negating the construction worker idea. "You said you came here to find your father. Do you know where he is?" Charlotte probed gently. Zoe's response was laden with sadness. "I don't know. He left us. He left my mom. She died when I was born. Grandma says I'm trouble. She says Daddy is trouble too. She says Daddy hid it and stopped," Zoe explained in her soft voice. Charlotte's eyes widened as she absorbed Zoe's words. After a moment, she continued, "So you're not from around here?" Zoe confirmed her arrival. "No, I came here. I came here when it was colder." Charlotte sought further clarification. "What do you mean, you came here? Did you come to someone's house or?" "I'm sorry, sweetheart. I'm just trying to understand where you were staying." Zoe's shoulders shrugged in response. "I slept on the streets. I got used to it. I often run away from Grandma. She's mean." Charlotte's heart ached at the complexity of Zoe's story and the limited answers she was receiving. "So how were you going to find your dad? Do you have an address or anything?" Again, Zoe's response was uncertain, accompanied by another shrug. Charlotte's heart swelled with compassion as she realized the gravity of Zoe's situation. She couldn't fathom the thought of such a young girl fending for herself on the streets, possibly alongside other homeless individuals. Anger rose within her toward a grandmother who seemed to have failed in her duty, forcing the child to seek refuge in the home of a stranger. Zoe, now engrossed in her candy, looked up at Charlotte. "Can I have some more?" Charlotte obliged and then gently probed for more details. "Zoe, you mentioned a piece of paper. Can you tell me about it?" As Zoe unwrapped another candy, she began to explain, her voice a mixture of innocence and hardship. "Every time Grandma screamed that I ruined her life, she would hold this piece of paper and shake it." The girl held up a torn and crumpled piece of paper. "She threatened to send me as a parcel to my father. When I was little, I was afraid she would do it. I always wanted to tear up that piece of paper with the address on it. I thought Grandma would forget the address and she would have no place to send me. One day, when Grandma was sleeping, I stole that piece of paper from her, tore it up, and ate some of it. Not all of it, just some of it," Zoe explained, her voice a mixture of hope and uncertainty. "Because I thought maybe one day I would want to find my dad. Maybe Grandma was lying about my dad being the bad guy. I thought, what if he was really nice?" Zoe held up the torn paper, her fingers gripping it as if it were a lifeline. "I only have the last few letters of the street and the house number. I went to the store, stole a city map, and marked all the streets that seemed to match." Charlotte's brows furrowed as she processed Zoe's story. Are you saying you didn't just stumble upon this house by chance? Zoe shook her head, her eyes revealing a mix of determination and vulnerability. I've been to all the other possible addresses. None of them fit as well as this one. This house even has the exact number. Charlotte's mind raced as she contemplated the situation. She felt a growing sense of responsibility for Zoe, yet she was at a loss for a solution. I can't think of anyone here who could be your father. The owners of this house are an older couple, and I don't think they could have a young daughter like you. Zoe's shoulders slumped as she absorbed Charlotte's words. Her voice was tinged with defeat as she whispered, "What am I going to do now? If I go back to Grandma, she'll definitely send me to an orphanage." Zoe's distress weighed heavily on Charlotte's heart. She was about to suggest they explore other options when an unexpected thought struck her, a memory from the past, a connection that she couldn't ignore. Her real son, who had tragically passed away when he was around Zoe's age. No, Charlotte's thoughts raced. This can't be right. But what if? Charlotte, her voice a mix of cautious hope, addressed Zoe again. Zoe, do you have anything else? Maybe a photo of your dad? Zoe's face lit up with a spark of excitement amidst her turmoil. Of course, I always carry it with me. Grandma threw it at me once, even stomped on it. I picked it up and kept it. It's torn, but you can still see his face. Zoe reached into her pocket, her small fingers retrieving the crumpled photo with a mixture of reverence and yearning. However, just as Zoe was about to show Charlotte the precious photograph, the front door unexpectedly swung open. Charlotte had been so engrossed in her conversation with Zoe that she hadn't noticed the return of Layla and Henry Adams from their shopping trip. The couple made their way directly to the kitchen, where Charlotte and Zoe's conversation was unfolding. As they entered, Layla's eyes widened in surprise, and her voice was sharp with curiosity. What in the world is going on here? Charlotte, what is this? Mrs. Adams' voice was demanding, her tone sharp as she entered the scene. Startled by the abrupt intrusion, Charlotte quickly rose from her seat, her face turning pale. Zoe, too, was taken aback, dropping the photo she had been holding onto the floor. Hello, Mrs. Adams. You're back, Charlotte greeted, her attempt at composure evident despite her surprise. As you can see, Mrs. Adams replied with a cool glance around the room, her expression one of disapproval. Her eyes shifted between Charlotte and Zoe, suspicion clear in her gaze. Crossing her arms, she raised an eyebrow and let out a displeased sigh. So it seems our house has become some sort of sanctuary in our absence. Is this what happens when we're gone? Her annoyance was palpable. Zoe shrank back, fear evident in her eyes. Acting swiftly, Charlotte positioned herself between Zoe and Mrs. Adams, as if shielding her from the woman's disapproving gaze. No, ma'am. Please don't misunderstand, Charlotte began, her voice respectful yet urgent. This little girl's name is Zoe. I found her standing outside the gates when I noticed her. Mrs. Adams cut Charlotte off with an authoritative wave of her hand. Silence, she commanded. Who is this girl, Charlotte? Is she your child? The sternness in Mrs. Adams' tone made it clear she was not in the mood for explanations. No, she's not my child, Mrs. Adams. I assure you, Charlotte responded, her words hurried as she tried to explain. She was standing outside, looking lost and hungry. I thought I'd offer her some food. Mrs. Adams turned a disapproving glare toward Zoe, her lips forming a tight line. Charlotte instinctively positioned herself as a barrier between Zoe and the woman's disapproval. Since when do you decide who gets food? Mrs. Adams' voice was laced with disdain. Are we running a charity here? I'm really sorry, ma'am, Charlotte apologized, her anxiety evident in her voice and demeanor. She didn't know how to navigate the situation, so she stumbled to find a solution, suggesting she could cover the cost from her paycheck. What salary? Mrs. Adams scoffed, her frustration clear. Do you think I'll keep you on after this? As Mrs. Adams reprimanded Charlotte, Mr. Adams' attention was drawn to the crumpled photograph on the floor. Curiosity piqued, he bent down to pick it up, his expression reflecting his confusion. Where did this come from? He asked, his interruption cutting through the tense atmosphere. Mrs. Adams was momentarily taken aback by her husband's unexpected question. Henry, can't you see I'm in the middle of a conversation? Mrs. Adams' voice was exasperated, her frustration palpable. I'm sorry, dear, Henry apologized, his attention focused on the photograph he was holding. Mrs. Adams continued, her irritation growing. Charlotte, where did you find this? Her tone was demanding, expecting an immediate response. Henry, are you not listening? What did I just say? Mrs. Adams' anger was evident as she questioned her husband's interruption. Charlotte hesitated, glancing between Mrs. Adams and Henry before finally answering. Zoe was looking for her father. She brought this photo with her, Charlotte explained, hoping to defuse the situation. Noticing the change in her husband's expression, Mrs. Adams' tone softened. Henry, are you okay? Her concern was evident, but Henry's attention was fixed on the photo. He moved to sit down next to Zoe, his voice gentle as he asked, Honey, where did you get that picture? Tears welled up in Zoe's eyes as she responded, I stole it from my grandma. Mrs. Adams responded to the revelation with an eye roll and a hint of condescension. Of course, you did. Look at you. We need to check our security footage. She might have taken something from us as well. Henry's pleading glance towards his wife seemed to implore her to hold off on accusations for now. Honey, who are the people in this picture? Henry asked quietly, his gaze softening with a touch of sadness. Zoe's face brightened, pride evident in her voice. That's my mom and dad. Henry handed the photo to his wife, and she carefully examined it through her reading glasses. She studied the picture intently before passing it back to her husband. As the truth dawned on them, both Henry and Layla were struck with disbelief. The similarities between Zoe and their own son began to surface, piece by piece, like a puzzle falling into place. Every shared resemblance, every familiar habit, seemed to intensify their astonishment. Their world was turning upside down, as if the pieces of their past were aligning in ways they never could have foreseen. As Layla leaned against the wall for support, her legs gave way beneath her. Henry and Charlotte rushed to her aid, guiding her to the sofa. In the flurry of activity that followed, dialing 911, fetching a drink, searching for her medication, Zoe managed to slip away unnoticed. By the time they realized she was gone, it was too late. Henry whispered, his voice heavy with emotion. How are we going to find her? Layla's intense gaze met her husband's. Henry, you have to find her. Do you understand? Her urgency was palpable. You have to find her, no matter what. The weight of their realization began to sink in, leaving them both overwhelmed with regret and a sense of the unknown. Oh God, what have we done? Henry's voice trembled with the weight of the situation. Henry had set out in search of Zoe, leaving the house quiet and empty. The doctors had come and gone, and now Layla found herself alone, her tears falling unchecked. Charlotte, with a gentle understanding, moved closer, offering tissues and taking a seat beside the grieving woman on the couch. Layla's voice trembled as she began to speak. I'm sorry, Charlotte. I know my temper can be difficult to handle. Her vulnerability was palpable, a stark contrast to her usual commanding presence. You see, Charlotte, I've always placed my son's future above all else. His lineage, his family, his name, those were my priorities. The weight of isolation was evident in Layla's eyes as she continued. But now that Henry and I are alone, I've come to realize that loneliness is the most terrifying thing of all. Wealth, status, They all mean so little in the face of being truly alone. She wiped her tears, her distress undeniable. This girl, Zoe, has turned my world upside down, Layla admitted, her voice cracking. Despite my doubts, the resemblance is too strong to ignore. I'm almost certain she's his daughter. Layla's confession revealed her inner turmoil, her regret for the decisions she had made. Charlotte listened patiently, her presence offering comfort to Layla in her moment of vulnerability. Layla's composed exterior had given way to a woman grappling with uncertainty and regret. The elegant facade was replaced with disheveled hair and rumpled clothes. The woman who once commanded respect now revealed her humanity, struggling to reconcile her idealized world with the reality she faced. Charlotte handed Layla a glass of water, a small gesture of support. Layla took a sip and closed her eyes, lost in thought. Moments passed before she opened her eyes again and continued to speak, her voice tinged with sorrow. Evan, my son, always indulged me, Layla recalled, her voice carrying a mixture of fondness and regret. He would patiently listen to my long speeches about our prestigious family lineage. He would talk about the weight of responsibility that comes with the blood of great ancestors flowing through our veins, Layla continued, her voice carrying a mix of nostalgia and regret. Evan had a way of gently reminding me that greatness was attributed to those who came before us, not necessarily to us. He believed that we hadn't done anything inherently worthy of being called great ourselves. Layla's gaze turned distant as she recounted, I had even selected a suitable bride for him. While she may not have been a striking beauty, she hailed from a highly respected and wealthy family. Layla's words hinted at the meticulous planning she had invested. But Evan, he had his own plans, she continued with a sigh. I thought I had everything under control. How wrong I was. One day, he introduced us to a young woman named Samantha, Layla said, pausing briefly to gauge Charlotte's reaction upon hearing Samantha's name. Samantha was of mixed Dominican and Caucasian heritage. Her father hailed from the Dominican Republic, and her mother was of European descent. I didn't bother learning much about her family background then, and I hardly paid attention to the fact that she was a college student. I merely needed to know who she was, Layla continued, and that was enough for me to show her the door. The weight of Layla's regret was palpable. Poor Samantha didn't even have a chance to remove her jacket during her first visit. And then, to my shock, my only son, my Evan, left with her. I was in a state of disbelief. I did everything in my power to bring him back, Layla confessed, her voice carrying a mix of determination and desperation. I resorted to threats and blackmail against Samantha. For a while, Evan did return home, but he was different, filled with anger and despair. He remained with us for about 2 years, but those years were agonizing for everyone involved. Layla's narrative continued, recounting the struggles Evan faced and the attempts to rehabilitate him. We managed to get him into rehab, and things began to improve for all of us. We even engaged with the family of another young woman, also from a well-off background. But it wasn't long before Evan slipped back into his old ways. He started drinking again. Layla's voice grew softer, almost pained, as she continued, never could I have fathomed that he had become a father during that time. He and Samantha didn't stay together for long, she had thrown him out. Perhaps my threats and blackmail had played a role in that outcome. When he learned of Samantha's passing, he turned to alcohol as a means of coping. And then, tragically, he made the irreversible choice to drive under the influence, Layla recounted, her voice quivering and her eyes moist with tears. It's all my fault, Charlotte, she confessed, her tone heavy with a raw and piercing pain. The composed Layla Allen, who had always projected an air of stern professionalism, was now stripped bare, consumed by vulnerability and the weight of her guilt. Do you think Henry will manage to locate her? She asked with a trace of desperation, her worry palpable in her voice. Don't worry, ma'am. He'll find her, I believe, Charlotte offered a soothing reassurance. But what if she resists going with him? Layla posed another concern, her anxiety etched across her features. Charlotte sighed softly. I'm not sure, ma'am. Zoe seems to be very scared. The door creaked open, and both women turned their attention towards it. Mr. Adams stood there, holding Zoe's hand gently. Tear tracks streaked across the little girl's face, rendering her appearance even more vulnerable. We're back, Henry announced softly, prompting Layla to make an effort to rise swiftly. Charlotte extended a helping hand, but Layla attempted to regain her balance on her own. She released Charlotte's hand and moved towards Zoe, whose eyes held a mix of curiosity and apprehension. Layla spoke with a warm but tentative smile. Let's start anew, shall we? I'm Layla, your father's mother. What's your name, sweetheart? Zoe hesitated in her response, her voice tinged with curiosity. Zoe. She seemed on the verge of asking more but held back. Layla placed a gentle hand on Zoe's small shoulder. Let's pick a room for you, and afterward, we can look at the photo. We have many pictures of your father, she assured. Zoe looked at Layla intently, then quietly asked, Will Daddy be here? Layla's gaze flickered momentarily to her husband before she answered softly, I'm afraid your father won't be able to join us, honey. He loved your mother deeply, and now he's with her. Zoe took a deep breath, seemingly grappling with the weight of this revelation, before silently following Layla's lead. Time passed, and half a year slipped away swiftly. Zoe's transformation was nothing short of remarkable. She had blossomed into a striking young girl, often adorned in lovely dresses and displaying impeccable manners that drew admiration from her peers. Layla's affection for Zoe was evident as she showered the young girl with unwavering love and exceptional care. As the days turned into weeks, Zoe's once shaken world found stability and warmth within the walls of the Adams household. Layla's pride overflowed, often leading to lengthy conversations with Charlotte about Zoe's remarkable grades and admirable academic accomplishments. Layla found herself utterly captivated by her granddaughter's progress and talents. The custody battle was protracted, requiring extensive time, energy, and resources to secure Zoe's custody. The maternal grandmother tenaciously clung to her claim due to her concerns about social services involvement, resulting in an arduous struggle. Grandma, I'm going to perform on Father's Day. Zoe's voice brimmed with excitement one day in the kitchen. Layla's curiosity was piqued, and she asked, Perform? What do you mean, dear? Zoe's enthusiasm spilled forth, I'm going to sing, Grandma. Layla's joy overflowed, and she enveloped Zoe in a warm, tight hug. That's wonderful news. You're my precious treasure, just like your daddy. It's no surprise I took his last name, Zoe explained, revealing her choice to adopt her father's surname as a way to honor him. Her decision reflected her deep desire to emulate her father's memory and pay homage to him. Layla's warmth radiated as she commended her granddaughter. I am immensely proud of you, Zoe. Yet, amid the celebration, a trace of melancholy clouded Zoe's spirit. She began to share her thoughts. I understand why Dad chose to be with Mom. I believe she was lonely without us and asked Dad to join her. After contemplating it, Dad decided to leave me in your care. He knew you were kind and would never harm me. So now, Dad is with Mom, and I'm with you. Turning around, Charlotte's eyes welled with tears, mirroring Layla's emotions. You're such a smart and caring young girl, Layla whispered gently to Zoe, encapsulating the love and connection that had flourished between them. On another occasion, while Charlotte was engrossed in folding freshly laundered clothes, Henry approached her with a hint of uncertainty. Henry, typically composed, seemed unusually hesitant. Glancing up from her task, Charlotte asked, Mr. Adams, is everything all right? Henry appeared taken aback and stammered, Me? Oh, yes, I'm perfectly fine. I just wanted to talk to you. Surprised by the unexpected encounter, Charlotte chuckled, Well, you're here now. Were you planning to help me fold these clothes? Slightly disoriented, Henry replied, "Oh, sorry. Actually, I wanted to tell you something. I've wanted to express this for a while. You deserve more than just apologies and gratitude. Your presence in our home has been a true blessing. I can't emphasize enough how much your efforts mean to us." Caught off guard by Henry's heartfelt words, Charlotte paused, her heart touched by his sincere appreciation. She nodded, at a loss for words. "I know Layla has apologized, but you know how she is. Anyway, I hope you won't mention this to her," Henry continued after a brief pause. He pulled out an envelope and handed it over carefully. "Please accept this as a small token of our gratitude and also as a way to make amends for my wife's behavior." A week later, Charlotte and her grandmother, Betty, embarked on a hiking journey along the Oregon section of the Pacific Crest Trail. The trek fulfilled a cherished dream of Betty's. Henry's gift came in the form of a check, substantial enough to cover Charlotte's mortgage and even provide her with the opportunity to take a break from work for the next decade. Henry assured her that even if she chose to quit her job, he was committed to ensuring she received her monthly salary until his passing. However, Charlotte had requested something simpler, a 2-week vacation, which she decided to share with her beloved grandmother Betty. The adventure marked the realization of a dream and symbolized the genuine connection that had flourished within the Addams household. "I've been wanting to express this for quite some time," Henry's voice held a note of sincerity as he addressed Charlotte. "Your contributions to our household surpass mere apologies and gratitude. You've been a genuine blessing to us. I cannot adequately convey how much your dedication has meant to our family." Caught off guard by his heartfelt words, Charlotte paused in her task, her astonishment evident. Henry's unexpected praise left her momentarily speechless. "I understand that Layla has extended her apologies, but you're aware of her tendencies," Henry continued, his voice calm but earnest. "Regardless, I would appreciate it if you didn't mention this to her. Nonetheless, I have something for you." From his pocket, he retrieved an envelope and handed it to Charlotte with care. "Please accept this as a small gesture of our appreciation. Also, I ask for your forgiveness for any unkind behavior my wife may have displayed toward you," Henry implored sincerely. A week later, a new chapter unfolded in Charlotte's life. She found herself hiking the Oregon section of the Pacific Crest Trail alongside her grandmother, Betty. Betty's long-standing dream was finally becoming a reality, and Charlotte was sharing in the joy of this long-awaited adventure. Henry's gift had come in the form of a check, a substantial sum that could cover Charlotte's mortgage and grant her the freedom to take a hiatus from work for the upcoming decade. Henry had gone the extra mile, even ensuring that if she chose to resign from her job, he would provide her monthly salary until his passing. Yet, in the spirit of simplicity, all Charlotte had asked for was a 2-week vacation, a request that now allowed her to fulfill her cherished dream of spending quality time with her beloved grandmother Betty on the breathtaking trail. Thank you so much for being a part of our storytelling family. I'll see you in the next adventure. Discover more fascinating stories by exploring the playlists linked below.